with you guys again. Thank you guys for tuning in every week, for your support, for your reviews, your comments. Really means the world to us. We want to start off, as we always do, with a review from one of you guys. This one is also from Spotify, from Jeremy. It says, "Hey guys, this was my first time listening to y'all's show. I wanted to say I really enjoyed it. I'd like to ask y'all to pray for my marriage. The devil is working to destroy our family. Thank you." Jeremy, give us an update. Definitely did pray for you when we saw this, and I just want you to know we are for marriages and for what God can do in marriages, and give us an update for sure.
On that, if you guys ever want to send us a DM for prayer, send it. Yeah,
you just did that this past week, and
I did I think it was last week. I did just a quick story, and I was like, hey, if you need prayer, just send us a DM. And man,
it's overwhelming.
And we prayed every single one of them. And it's not something I'm bragging about, but I just want you guys to know, just could do that. And then I think this week I got a DM. I was like, hey, are you still taking prayer requests? And I was like, absolutely. Yeah. If you guys need prayer, please.
Yeah. It's, if you are ever wondering, I know I sometimes get, messages from people just saying is there, something that we can pray about, or a marriage we can pray about, man, just lift up marriages in general. Yeah. The enemy is after marriages. The destruction of marriage and family is top priority. And so we need to be in prayer, and we need to be lifting up marriages. And so, don't hesitate at any point. Even if you're in the middle of brokenness in your marriage, I think you praying even for others in their marriages is really, it's uplifting in a lot of ways when you're doing that. So I just want to encourage you guys to keep praying. And the topic that we're going to talk about today is kind of, I think, interesting. I sometimes bring up topics to Brad, and I'm just like, what do you think about this? And you know how you say I have a dead face? Mm-hmm. Which, if you haven't heard any of our episodes talking about that before, I should probably preface it just means that I apparently give Brad a blank look.
It's
when he wants me to have
super unenthusiastic. I'm not even sure if she's listening. It's
usually me. I'm trying to really tune in. Okay, but apparently he calls it my dead face, and which is very unappealing word. But you also have that. Mm-hmm. When I bring up topics, this is what you do. You go, No. And then I'm just I don't know. Did that land? Is it something that we should talk? Am I even on the right track?
Yeah.
That's what.
Yep.
It's very similar to what you just did right now, which is in no way, shape, or form affirming that I am either correct or incorrect.
Because I'm letting you go.
No,
just letting you do it.
Not the time.
That's just
when your wife says, "I don't even know if you want to talk about it." Yep. That to me inherently says, no, I do not want to talk about this. I actually think you're wrong, but I'm just going to let you have this. That's what that says to me. It's worse than the dead face.
It's not, it's not that I didn't want to talk about this. There's I don't know if anything's off limits on our pod. To talk about.
We're the ones who decide, so is it?
I don't think so. So, we don't have a producer that's watching out for
us. Cut that,
no. No, it's not that I, didn't agree with you or didn't want to talk about it. You have been, so it's kind of you've been thinking about something for a while. And you got the topic from something, so you're just sitting on it, marinating in it. And then you drop it on me, and then you're expecting me yep, that's it right there.
No.
Yep. And then just start going.
Incorrect.
And I can't, because you just threw a little bit of seasoning on me. I'm not marinating in this yet.
This is just like the dead face. Yeah. Okay. When I'm just looking for some kind of are we, should I continue to marinate? For lack of a better word,
What, like
because
you
that's a
marinated?
weird thing to think of you as a human marinating, but whatever.
In your thoughts,
Yeah.
like not physically.
Anyways, yes. So it's like, for me, it's just like, okay, is this, I usually try to have a conversation with you enough in advance so that you can also marinate. So that we're not on here and I'm talking and then this is what you'll also do. You'll say something and you're like, yeah, let's talk about it. And then we'll start talking about it. And then you're just like, no, I don't agree with that.
Like the last episode when you were like,
And I'm just like,
what'd you say? You're like, everyone inherently.
no, I said, I think there are some people.
That's not what you first said. Not what you first said.
Anyways, we're getting off topic. Clearly, what we're talking about today and how it came up, which a lot of times as happens is, I do a lot of coaching one-on-one with women, and then we do coaching with couples. And in, a lot of times when I'm coaching women one-on-one, the question of why something happens is always inherently there.
Yeah.
And I think this happens in any kind of crisis, tragedy, whatever it is in our life. We look for a why because it helps us to feel better.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about there's never a why, specifically when it comes to like affair recovery or rebuilding trust, that justifies the action, right? Like if you're looking for this why and it's like, somebody gives you a why, it's never enough, right? Not that you shouldn't get to the root of the problem, but understanding that the why in and of itself is not sufficient payment, if you will. So, she was discussing kind of like childhood traumas and, obviously your family of origin has a huge impact on the way that you handle marriage, conflict, all the things, right? Has a huge impact. And so she asked specifically if the people that we worked with, if we've always seen some level of trauma in childhood that would contribute to someone's tendency towards having an affair. And so I was really contemplating the question, and I was like, no, I don't think, even in your story, that's not your story.
No, I don't have any.
Right. I mean, you had overall a good childhood, right? And so it's, knowing that is not what I feel is this overarching theme that we've seen in, the couples that we've worked with. And so then I really started thinking about if there was a common thread or theme that we have seen. And so what I brought up to you when you gave me the dead face that I'm going to start using for you.
Okay.
Or maybe it should be dead voice. Like maybe that's what it is with you. You're just like, is that I feel the common theme that we do see when we're working with couples is the narrative of failure that a betrayer has in their head. And that's kind of the emotion that you gave me when I initially said this. So do you I want to unpack what I mean by that. And obviously what you would, like if I say the narrative of failure, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I'm trying to think, and for me, like in
your experience, and even with the couples that we see, because it plays out differently, for sure.
Yeah, it does, because there's two sides, like two things. So one, it's the narrative of failure of just like walking around like your dog just died kind of deal. Like that's your mentality. I've never had that mentality, like the woe is me.
I don't even necessarily think of it in that way. I think of it as more like not measuring up. Yeah.
Well, I was going to finish my thoughts, but because you asked me to define it.
No, I do. So, because I never think of like the narrative of failure. I guess I don't think of it as the
narrative of failure. Yeah. Like in and of it, like what's a failure? Like you failing something, right? And it's a narrative that's going through your head. So there's some that just walk around like they're a failure at everything.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think for me, I always felt like I wasn't good enough at X. It
Right.
could be a task, it could be a friendship, it could be, whatever it was. I always felt like I didn't measure up
Right.
enough. And that's probably why I do what I do today, why I'm in the field I am today, why I played football from junior high to college. Like, there's like this driving factor of
Right.
I always,
It drove you to excel in a lot of areas.
it did. And so I think that's why it was a hard thing for me to like chew on when you were like, it's the narrative of failure. And I'm like, I never sit there in my head and say I'm a failure.
Right.
I've never done that. I mean, I've failed at things, clearly I'm not, like immune to that, or I don't, it's not like I'm ignoring things. Like clearly I failed at things and I say, oh, I failed at that, or I'm not good, whatever. But I think my narrative has always been like, yeah, I'm not good enough. Right. Just and, I don't think my parents did that to me. I think that, maybe on some level, right, just inherent, just like on a level of no intentionality behind it.
Yeah.
But just on some level probably, but it wasn't anything like you said. Like I don't have anything that I would like, classify as childhood trauma.
Right.
I grew up in a good home and great family and parents that are still together, right? They're still, married and they're still, following Christ. And so, I mean, in that sense, I didn't, I don't feel like I have this trauma, but I do 100% because I still have it today. Like, am I good enough for this? Am I good enough for that? Can I not excel at this? Of course you want to excel at things, but more of, so I've seen this a couple of times this week. It's kind of funny, but it said that when God calls you to do something, he's already accounted for your stupidity and lack of, or lack of equipping or whatever, lack of ability, right? He's already accounted for that when he called, so that's a kind of along the same lines too. Like it's funny, it's hilarious when you read that, but at the same time, like that's how I feel, I would say 95% of the time, where I'm like, yeah, I'm not smart enough. I'm not, those things. Like I'm not fast enough. I don't process this as fast as I need to. I'm not as good as, X or whatever. And you're never, if you compare yourself to everyone else, like you'll fail.
Oh yeah.
Like you can't do that. And I realize that. And so I don't necessarily say I need to be better than, but it's like, I guess like, could I run with those guys? Like, can I run with this? Can I run with that? And can I, I'm not going to be a burden. I'm not going to be the guy that they're like, oh, man, I wish he wasn't, here. Or, like I wish if we could just trim him off, like we'd be much better. Right. That's what goes through my head a lot.
So, when we were talking about this, we kind of talked about how that narrative of failure, to me, it's kind of unique in the fact that I think it does show up very differently in individuals, but I'm talking about getting like to the root of something, but how it both plays into like deep insecurities, right? But then also can come off as pride.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just very interesting that I feel like that narrative of failure leaves you open, like susceptible to the enemy's tactics and temptations, and because you're looking to fill that, like, right, almost like you want to shut down this voice in your head, right, that says you don't measure up in some capacity, and so when we look to someone other than Christ to fill that, it leaves you susceptible, and I know you've talked about and been very open about like insecurities and feeling that. So do you feel like that is typically what we see when we're coaching, is like them playing off on both sides of that, either like insecurities or pride that have left someone susceptible to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've said that a few times where I think pride, is it pride that I always talk about? Mm-hmm. I think I've said that a few times where it's like pride is really what drives all the nonsense, right? Especially for men at some level, it's, a pride thing. And yeah, for me, I mean, I think that, okay, so the couples that we work with, yeah, I mean, we've worked with quite a few, and there's been men that are like, even while you're working with them, are just like very prideful, not even to the point, and that gets into more stuff where it's like they're not ready yet, so like kind of that non-remorseful side of it. But I think that everybody has insecurities.
Yeah.
Some just ignore them, better than others. I think at some point everybody ignores their insecurities at some, time, but everyone has insecurities. And I think that that's what drives, I don't know, for me, that's what drove, and I see what you're saying, insecurities and pride. Like for me, it was my insecurities were being, I want to say lied to, but I don't feel like they were being lied to. I feel like when I did all my stuff, I'm always insecure. I mean, this, like my insecurities, it's like a very physical thing I have, and smart. Like, I don't know how better to say it, right? Like, I don't feel like if there's times I'm sitting at a table, I don't feel like I should be at that table. Like that is kind of, I don't know if that helps people understand it. Like I'm educated and, I have some intellect, right? But there's times where I'm sitting or standing around a group and I'm like, what am I, why was I even invited? Like, I don't understand why I'm here, kind of, not because I'm not grasping what's going on, because I don't feel like I have any part of this. Like, what am I going to do? Right? Like, what awesome thing is, am I going to contribute to this?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like I should be here. And then physically, I always deal with insecurities. I always have. I think maybe not so much in high school, but like just always have dealt with insecurities. So I think when I was being fed the opposite outside of marriage on that. I mean, people weren't telling me I was smart. Not necessarily that, but like the physical side of it. Like I'm very open about my story where, it was, like if you really look into my story, what I was doing for work, I was in, right? Like I was in it, like I belonged at that table. I was picked. I was all those things, so that fed that what am I doing here? Side of insecurity, right? Like I was good enough. I was more than capable, like all those things. And so it was like that fed what I was doing. And then after the day, and we would go out to go get dinner or whatever, like I was, clearly Lisa knows all this. It's not like I'm sharing some brand new information, but when it go out, then I was getting noticed. And clearly by women, not by the guys I was with. I was getting noticed. And so then that dealt with, that combated that insecurity of like my physical insecurity, right? And so both of those, it was like it's this twisted, evil way that the enemy works where he's giving a truth, right? Like on a level, he's giving a truth.
That's so true, yeah.
Because God would give me that truth too. Like you belong at that table, like you're who I made you. You're physically good. Like, like God's going to give those truths. Like, God's going to give that truth. He gives that truth to me. But then during this time, it was like the enemy's like feeding that, you know, to an unhealthy level where, you know, it was what I was doing for work. I mean, it was the stuff I signed up to do. And we were like, you know, quote unquote, making this difference and, you know, taking these networks down and doing all these things. And it was like, man, I'm jumping on a helicopter every day and getting dropped in the middle of nowhere and doing something and getting picked back up and rolling. You know, it's like these things, right? Yeah. They're happening. Constant action, constant, like, put me in that. And I'm getting picked to do it. So that was like that side, like, you belong at that table. Like,
it's
that's what you do.
It's so true that you're exactly right. It is this truth that God means to fulfill in us.
Yeah.
And the enemy does give a version of it. It's just laced with poison.
Absolutely. Because, like, you know, then, you know, getting recognized in this facet that I just said, and then I'd go out to dinner. And then, like we talked about, where I'd stay out a little bit longer. I just kept getting noticed. And it was that feeding of, like, I am attractive, for lack of, you know, that's basically what was going through my head. Like, wow, really? Like, that girl's looking at me, you know, like, all these things that, you know, fed what my insecurities were. And it was, you know, giving me this twisted truth of where what I should have done is just been, like, you know, trusting in God's design and what God has for me. And then if I needed to seek out support and affirmation and all those things, it comes from you.
Right.
It doesn't, I don't even, like, only you. Mm-hmm. You know, if one of my friends says something good to me, like, great, that's cool. But I'm not seeking for approval. Right. And I'm not necessarily seeking approval, you know, from you necessarily, but it's like,
no, but it's the recognition that in a marriage, like, we can affirm each other in a way that we're not meant to be affirmed by anyone else.
And that's where I should have been.
Yeah. And
I wasn't, right? I was getting affirmed by everything else. And then that's when, you know, compromise sets in. And then, I mean, because the confidence, this is what's crazy. And we've never talked about this, but the confidence that I walked around with in that time was huge. I mean, it was to the point of, like, me and this is not, I'm not bragging on any of this stuff. Like, I don't like to, you know, but it was a point of, like, you walk in somewhere and everyone notices you because of confidence of what you're walking in. Not cockiness. It was just this confidence that I was like, well, it probably did turn into cockiness for sure.
Yeah.
But it was this confidence of walking around, like, almost like, you know, like you own the place kind of deal. Right. And that's how it was. And then you feel untouchable because of what you're doing during the day or at night. And then you're going out later, you know, it's this mix of the lying, right? The lies that were being fed to me. And with that twisted truth, right, that's being fed to me, versus just trusting and leaning into what God's promises, God's
like
the truth, right? Yeah, exactly. Because clearly the truth I was on, or the twisted truth I was on, and the reason I say that is because, the enemy was feeding this. You are good enough. You are. You do belong at the table. You know, you are attractive. You are talented. In shape. You are talented. You are smart. Like, all those things, like, that was what was being fed to me, but in this twisted, dark environment where now I still battle.
That's what I was going to say to kind of dive into, because I think that is something that a lot of people have a conception, right? When they hear your story, when they see where we're at, when they, you know, you've been so open about insecurities and, like, laying it all out there, and that narrative of failure that you really were combating all the time, that they assume, looking at you and seeing where you're at, that those things are gone.
Yeah.
You know, that they're just gone, and you don't battle with it anymore. And so, what does that look like now? Like you just said, like, I still battle.
Yeah,
those
I wish they were gone. I do things to try to make them gone, you know. But there's times, very real times, where I'm literally sitting at a table and I'm listening to what's going on, and I'm like, why am I here? Mm-hmm. You know, like what? Yeah, like I just don't these dudes are so much smarter than I am. Like, what am I doing here? Like, there are very real times that happens. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon for me, you know, in any situation. That's not uncommon for me. That's something that like always, and, you know, maybe I'm overly hyper-focused or whatever on it, but that is something that's always there. So for me, and then like, of course, like, yeah, physical nature of stuff. You know, I need to make sure, and you know, I was joking about it in the last episode where I was, you know, saying you've gotten super crunchy, and like it like bleeds onto me, you know, but at the same time, I think God calls us to be disciplined in all areas of our life, and one area that everyone overlooks is like food, is, you know, their eating habits and what they eat, what they consume. Like, everyone overlooks that. Oh, look, like you could be, you know, on the heavier side, on the lighter, whatever it is. Like, I'm not talking about like necessarily like body composition. Like, I'm not, you know, that's not something I'm like, oh, if you're overweight, you're clearly sinning. Like, no, I'm not getting into that at all. Yeah. Right. At all. But for me, I feel my body feels better. I have more clarity if I'm disciplined in all aspects of my life, and that includes food. Mm-hmm. You know, if I'm disciplined in that, then I feel better. Like not like feel better, like, oh, you know, everything's great. Like literally my health is better. I sleep better. You know, like all those things. And it helps me like push forward and get those narratives out of my head, you know, because, you know, like, you know, we help with the youth. So like I'll be on stage or when we're talking and we're speaking at a speaking event, and I'll see a picture of myself and I'm like, oh my gosh. And you're like, no, stop it. You know, cause I'm so critical about all those things. And I'm not critical about everyone and all those things. Yourself. It's literally just myself. Like, I'm not like, seriously, I'm not like overly critical on anything else. Mm-hmm. It's literally just myself. I mean, and I'm trying to get away from this too. So like when we go speak, or when I speak on my own, our church we go to now, our pastor, he's amazing. And he's a mentor, and he's really like, I think the old church we used to go to and the old pastor that retired, like he was a mentor to me. But I never really utilized him in that sense, right? He's still a friend of mine. You know, we're still friends, but I never like really utilized him in the sense of like that, right? And our pastor now, you know, a different time in my life, I'm older, you know, all those things, but I feel like he's kind of taken me, you know, under this wing and even mentored me without me even like saying like, I need this, you know? And like investing in me. And so even with that, you know, he's helped me with speaking and with being able to write, like, you know, write better, right? You know, with you know, because there's a way that you need to speak and like bring up, you know, because I've gotten to speak at men's events. Because
when you speak, it's not conversational like we're doing now.
And he's even said that. He's like, it's not like the pod, dude. Like that's conversational. You bring up a topic, you just go, and that's great. Like I listen, it's awesome. It has its place. Yeah, but not when you get on stage, right? Like you can't do that. And so he's really helped me, like leaps and bounds. Well, both of us, but really leaps and bounds from where we were. And there's times like I'll get up there and I'll speak, and as soon as I'm done, I'm like, was that like, how was that? Was that good? Like, is that, you know? And he'll come up to me and tell me like, and then later, you know, even like, hey, you know what, if you know, this was kind of lacking, you know, kind of, you know, fine tune this and that. But I don't need to immediately do that. Like you should always look at what you've done and see if you could do it better. Yeah. But I at the beginning, I'd always get done, and it was like as soon as I could, I'm like, moving as fast as I can to get over to where he's at and be like, hey, was that like, we're good? Like, why, you know what I mean? And so I still battle all those things.
Right.
Absolutely. And the only way, there's two ways I combat it is one is like, yes, prayer, like just praying. Right. And we try to fast at least once a week. These things those are things that I try to do to like just continue to seek God. But it doesn't zero out everything that goes on with me because we all have issues. Right. So I think disciplining physically, making sure I'm working out, making sure I'm doing those things, not to feed a vanity. Yeah, that's
really important.
But to feel this healthiness, right? So, if I weigh, let's go for weight, right? If I weigh 230, but I feel great, like I'm not worried about it, like I really, really try not to be like so critical about how I look. And cause I want all my confidence to come from God.
Yeah.
And I know though, if I'm not disciplined in areas, like that's going to affect me spiritually.
Absolutely.
And so I have to have all these disciplines. Like I want to have them, and then I feel like God just continues to like push me past my insecurities and puts me, where like I'm saying, like, I don't feel like I should be around sitting at that table. And there's times I'm sitting at that table and I'm thinking that, and then we start talking and like, I'm actually, when I'm talking, there's, people are listening and writing down notes, and it's not because of some grandiose thing I'm saying, but it's because I do belong at that table.
I feel like in a lot of ways, if we let God, like if we start standing in his truth, he positions us to, it sounds weird, but I think he positions us to be used in areas of insecurity.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think, and I'll say in insecurity and in pain, I think that if we let God like come in and bring healing, and we come in and we let God step into, not that your insecurities just magically disappear, because I think it's so important that people hear this, men and women, that, and if you're a betrayer or a betrayed spouse, knowing that, even if you're still battling these insecurities, that may have been an open door for you to do things you never thought you would do, that it doesn't mean that you're just going to do those things again. It's an opportunity for you to take twisted truth, get rid of it, and stand in the truth and be positioned to be used by it.
I'll say this, with everything I was saying, what it really is my insecurities aren't driving me to excel. They're not driving me to get in better shape. That's not what drives me to do those things. I want to be a better speaker. I want to have mentors speaking in my life. I want to be as healthy as I can be. Like I want all those things because it helps me do what God wants me to do. Like that's really what it comes down to,
right.
Like even at work, like I want to have knowledge. I want to have skill, because I'm not just representing myself. I'm representing my walk with Christ.
Yeah, that is such a good thing to
environment, right? Every environment I am. And so like, if I'm at work, I want to be those things because I want to be able to speak into other people's lives, and I want to be able to have those guys be able to come up to me and talk to me if they need to, about whatever. Right. And it's happened. And it's a place that I want to be in, but all those disciplines, like I want to be, and so I'll say this, kind of to help maybe explain it to people that don't quite understand where I'm going with, even with work, is you could be the most likable person, right? And everyone gets along with you. But if you're not holding your own, running through a house, or not holding your own, shooting drills and all those things, all the skills that we have, then you're not really like in the fold. right? And so in that sense, like dudes like you and they'll talk to you and they'll be friends with you, but you're still kind of like this semi-outsider. And I've been on the teams for, when I get on, like 2009, so I've been on for a long time. So I've done a lot of things and a lot of guys know me, but I want to always make sure my skills are up to a certain level because I want those guys to, like, I want to be in that circle still. Not because, oh, Brad's a good shooter, or, oh, Brad can do this, oh, Brad can do that. No, because, like, I have the opportunity to show them who God has, like, what God's done in my life.
Yeah. When you're saying that, what I'm thinking is, like, what you're doing is you want to be there not to feed your insecurity, but to guard your influence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
There's a very, very distinct difference there. Not influence to like feed anything, but to reflect Christ.
If your insecurities are driving you, you will walk away from God's plan for your life. You 100%. Like if your insecurities are going to drive you to succeed in something, for success, you're going to compromise like your moral compass over and over again because your insecurity is driving you.
Yeah.
It's going to be an unhealthy environment. And I think that that's where I was, and if you would have asked me back then, I would have just laughed at you because I'm like, what are you talking about?
I'm so like, secure.
Yeah.
I'm so confident.
Like clearly. But now looking back, it's like, no, my insecurities drove everything I did. Like I enjoyed football.
Yeah.
Like I love the game, right? I really enjoyed it. I played it in junior high and high school, and then I had the opportunity to go in college, and I really enjoyed it. And not one time during that was like, oh, my insecurities are driving me, because I don't feel like I really had big insecurities throughout my, at least through high school. You have your high school awkwardness, insecurity thing, right? But it didn't really drive me. But then as I'm getting older and in it, and I look back now, I'm like, well, yeah, because I didn't ever consider myself an athlete because I had to work hard at what I was doing, right? I never considered myself good enough because I wasn't a starter yet. I never considered myself like, oh, this is my position, because I always felt like I was going to lose it. Like that's all insecurities driving me. Where it wasn't because I wanted to be a better skilled player. It wasn't because I wanted to be a better athlete. It wasn't all these things. It was, no, my insecurities drove me. So when I talk to people now and they find out I played at NAIA school, but they find out I played college, and they're like, oh, wow, man, that's awesome. And we did like this poll, just side note, we did this poll with guys on the team, and a lot of guys were collegiate athletes or prior military, somewhere in the military. So it was like this high level of performance that always has to happen, and that's who's on the teams. I never considered myself a high level athlete, a high level performer athlete. Never, ever did I do that. I know I played in college, but it never was something where I was like, oh, well, not many guys get to do this. No, it was, and even when I first got on the team, I knew it was hard to get on the team, but I didn't realize like the guys on team are consistently performing at a high level. Like I've never, because I don't look at myself like that, because I was letting my insecurities drive me.
Right.
Now I was just talking to a friend of ours at church, and he was asking me a few questions about our course and just different things like that. And I was like, here's the deal with the guys. Like we all know our level. Like we all know we're performing at a high level. Like that's not a secret. And it's not something that's like, you're sitting there being like, oh, well, no, I'm, like the fake humbleness, right? No, everyone knows, like, this is the skill level we're performing at. But at the same time, we want to be approachable by all, right? Like, so I always say, like, we want to be untouchable in skill. Doesn't matter who it is. But at the same time, I want to be approachable by everybody. I want to be able to have a conversation. I want to be able to gain knowledge and impart knowledge on anyone I come in contact with. But by no means do I think I'm performing at a low level.
Yeah.
But that's because my insecurities aren't driving me, right? So I can accept this, right? I think if you would have asked me in college, like, man, you're a collegiate athlete, like that's a big deal. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Because that's my insecurities. saying like, no, my insecurities are driving me to try to succeed, to push harder, to push beyond what I'm thinking, which is all good things, but what's driving you to do it?
Yeah.
And that's where you fail, right? When I first, and when everything happened with us, insecurities drove me for everything, everything. And so because that insecurity was driving me and I didn't trust in God's confidence for my life, and then I start compromising my morals. I start compromising like secular moral standards, right? I mean, that's really, even in the secular world,
right.
Like you shouldn't cheat on your wife, right? So I started compromising my secular moral standards too. Like all these things, it's just like this constant slope of going down because the driving force wasn't God's confidence in me. It was my own flesh and my insecurities wanting to drive me to be better, when in essence, it just drove me out of the will God had for my life.
Yeah, it's so true that the motive behind your drive is a big deal. And, I've seen that shift in you, right? Like, not that the insecurities have disappeared, but how you're feeding them, how you're getting rid of them, how you're driven is different. And I think it's a really beautiful thing to see that transition of, okay, I'm not going to take this twisted truth. I need to stand in God's truth. And I think you have to always remind yourself of that, because I think it's always this element of the enemy's always trying to give us a twisted version of truth. And it's usually the most accessible and easy to relate to.
Yeah.
And that's why we're we're always talking to you guys about, like, you need to be in God's word. Listen to last episode. Like, you need to get up. You need to get in God's word. You need to know the truth, right? Because you don't want to take the twisted truth. You don't want the truth with poison, right? You want to know that even though I struggle with insecurities, this is what God says.
Yeah.
Right? Even though I'm struggling with hurt, this is what God says. This is who God is. You're having to constantly replace the lie, right? Replace that narrative. And the more that you do that, the more it becomes a part of who you are. And then all of a sudden you are guarding influence, not feeding insecurities. And I've seen that develop in you. But I wanted to make sure that we really talked about it, because I do think people have just a delusion of the man that you are today. I think that the outside perspective looks at you like no internal narrative that has failure or insecurities at all. That they look at you and think like, why would he ever be physically insecure? Why would he ever have, like, the external picture that people see says that you don't deal with any of that stuff anymore. And so I think it's important that people know and see that just because you walk out healed, or you have God redeem parts of your story, or you're being used in some level, doesn't mean you don't struggle. It doesn't mean you don't deal with stuff. It just means you know how to deal with it differently. It means that when you struggle, you know where to go to. And that's the key, no matter what we're going through. So it's like, because it will come. Like, if you have not gone through something in your marriage, you will.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, whether it's between the two of you or with your kids or external pressures and stressors, like, you will go through something. Who you go to in the middle of that determines where you end up. And so I just think it's really awesome to get a chance to know that even in the struggle, how differently your life can be, and the narrative that you listen to can change. And so I think challenge for this week, you have one or no? Like, how you're looking at me with, I mean, I guess it goes all into this. Like, you have got to recognize the twisted truth. Yeah. And you have to learn to stand in the truth. Yeah. And I think the reason why we say twisted truth is, like, you have to recognize that line can be very blurry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you have to be so Like, I mean, from the very beginning, when Eve is in the Garden of Eden in perfection,
Yeah.
there was twisted truth.
Yeah.
Did God really say? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then this element of just like, hey, you're going to know between good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
It was true. She would, right?
Yeah.
But it was twisted truth.
Mm-hmm.
It was laced with poison. And it's like, we've got to be so, I mean, this is someone who was in perfection in communion with God.
Yeah.
It's like, if we think we're like so secure that we cannot fall for twisted truth, that is foolishness.
Yeah.
So we have to be so clear. We have to pay attention to the narrative in our head. We have to pay attention to what God says overall. So yeah, that would be, I think, the challenge
That's a good
for the week.
challenge.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.